Welcome to Heart Home Community's most recent Baldwinsville Community Update. I'm your host, Shelly Hoffman. Hey everybody, it's Shelly and Brian. Brian is once again my in-studio guest, so I'm super excited for in person. And it's been a while.
It's been a while. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So with it being a while, obviously, as you know, in the county, stuff's always happening. But there's three big topics we're going to talk about today. The first one is the aquarium, which passed.
Which passed. It was an innovative idea. It was an aggressive idea. It was introduced in last year's budget. And we'll talk about the budget in a little bit, but it's been a year, just about a year. And, it was unprecedented that a project that big was presented within the budget. Typically, when there's a major capital project or initiative, those projects are handled on a separate basis. But in this case, county executive felt that both that and the sports complex would be put into the more appropriate for him to put it into the budget. And what it ended up doing was distracting us from everything else in the budget, which, I'm the budget guy. I'm the guy that chairs Ways and Means and has to focus on the meat and potatoes of the budget. So we did not make a decision last year because they failed to get enough support to get it to pass. So it sat in limbo for the better part of the year with a continuous effort to fill in the blanks, answer and respond to questions that legislators had and the community had about the project, its viability, and whether to do it. And as you know, it passed. I voted against it, but it passed. So at this stage of the game, and I said this the day the vote was taken, all I can hope for is tremendous success for the project because the vote is history.
Was it a close vote?
Yes, very close. So close that it was really down to the wire what would happen. And usually we have a strong sense for how things are going to turn out. This is not one of those things. I think it's important to talk about why I voted against it and why others, based on what they've said, voted against it, and why there was incredibly strong opposition within the community to the project. And unfortunately, in my view, most of that opposition, while I respect the opinions folks have in terms of how government should prioritize its business and finances, et cetera, most of the opposition that we heard about was, I hate to say without basis, but not relevant to Onondaga County government. People talked about you should be spending it on roads, you should be spending it on infrastructure. Well, I can point back to the budgets that I've been involved with where we've done nothing but increase spending, and those spends are always a priority. It also drifted into social programs and things like that, our kids and the true needs of this community with respect to poverty that nobody denies. But I can also point back to the last, counting this past budget, 4 budgets where Ryan has been county executive. He announced the PI initiative, poverty, infrastructure, economic development. And in every one of those budgets, we have increased money for poverty. And those increases were very strategic spends to target the exact things that are problems in our community. And, poverty doesn't just sit in the city of Syracuse, but poverty is where it's most prevalent. But it's everywhere. It's around the corner from where we're sitting right now here in Lysander and in the village. It's all around us. But those spends increase every year. And we'll talk about that in the budget, how we're increasing investment in those areas yet again. But some of that was, in my view, used by the strongest opponents, cite the community against the project. For me, it was really simple. It was positioned as a program that would pay for itself. I didn't feel the financial pro formas were strong enough, and the plan was strong enough to really pay for it down the road. It was positioned as something that would pay for itself. But I fear that it's going to be an expense to taxpayers down the road. Unlike the amphitheater, which is, was another controversial project in the community, but that is the most successful county program that exists in terms of paying for itself. The every park we have, every municipality has, the village, towns,
right.
They're an expense to taxpayers. They're an amenity provided by government. It's something that government within its mission feels it should do. Especially in communities like ours where there is the financial wherewithal to provide and maintain those facilities, but they're a straight expense. Now, if we came into the aquarium project as, hey, this is going to be an expense, but, and I truly believe these assertions, it's going to benefit the economy. Local businesses will prosper from the existence of this aquarium. There will be jobs. It's undeniable. It's going to take a lot of people to run an aquarium the size that Ryan's proposing. Tourism economic development benefits will be tremendous. Okay. And within that, there's all kinds of self-sustaining revenue streams that are created as a result, room tax and sales tax when money gets spent in the community that helps fund government where government doesn't need to raise property taxes. That's a very real goal, and it's always at the top of the list. How do we not raise property taxes?
Right.
Because this is a tough state. We get taxed this way, that way, the other way, up, down, middle. It's crazy. And it stinks for that reason. Okay. It really does. It's very challenging when we wake up on a the weather's really bad today, folks. When you wake up on a day like today and you say, why am I here?
Yes.
The weather stinks. And
taxes.
Man, taxes are terrible here. You know?
That is true.
Yeah. So, but at the end of the day, this is going to be successful in those ways, you know, from an economic standpoint, quality of life standpoint, education, you know, the fact that the schools are going to really have access to this and benefit from it, which means our kids will, which means just something else that's going to hopefully keep our kids here in the long run, as opposed to something else contributing to keeping our kids here. To me, it's just, you know, having for myself, I mean, it's a strong priority of mine personally. How do we make this place better so our kids don't need to go to Philly or Pittsburgh or New York or wherever to make their living and make their way in life?
So one of the questions I had when you were talking is it was presented, right, as it would be self-sustaining.
Yeah.
And to your point, there's a lot of pros to it. Maybe it'll be self-sustaining, you know, projection, future will tell that. Does it matter? So question for the public, does it matter how it was presented when you can look at the big picture of how it will be?
Well, it depends. You know, every legislator's coming at it from a different perspective. So I'm a financial guy on the legislature, and I'm the chair of Ways and Means, which means I really have to look at the numbers. That's what I'm tasked with in my role among those 17 people. It's also what I do in my life, my real life. So
he lives it, people.
Yeah. So that I got stuck there. Other people right out of the chute said, this is going to be great for our kids. This is going to be great for our community. This is going to be great for our quality of life.
Right.
I'm on board. And I'm thinking, what about the expense? What about paying for repairs and maintenance down the road? But to them, that was good enough.
Right.
Okay. And then for others, it took some convincing, and they were ultimately convinced. And we read about some of those things, you know, that mattered to those legislators. But again, the vote has been cast, and we're getting an aquarium, and I sure hope it is a raging success. And again, the benefits to the community, to your point, are going to be fantastic. They are. And if it's an expense down the road, which I think it probably will be, it is what it is. So we move forward. And again, I think that it wasn't enough to convince me, but it was enough to convince enough people to say we're moving forward. So to that end, I give Ryan tremendous credit for his perseverance, because it didn't pass in the budget, and he stuck to it for 10, 11 months and ultimately got it passed with enough legislators.
Well, and I think to your point before we went live, we were talking a little bit, is once it's here, now it's focus on making it a success.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Don't make it a detriment. Don't focus on the negative of what could possibly happen.
Yeah. And
get it going. And
there's a certain amount of money certain amount of people out there who aren't done fighting this project yet. And, you know, I fear that the objections are politically motivated, which muddies the water, but it's, again, the times that we're living in.
Right.
And, another feature of the state that we're living in. It's a very political state. It's a political battleground in many ways. So, anyways, so to that end, I just, again, hope it's a raging success on the project. And I'm going to hold the line on the financial end of things. We're going to do this right or we're not doing it. As far as the next steps and little things that we need to do to shore up how this is going to work.
Well, there's still, to your point, there's a smart way of doing things, and then there's just kind of throwing money for things that don't make sense, and that's any project that you do.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting anyone's doing that, but you're right. There's a right way there's a way, and then there's a better and a much better way. And I'm just hoping that I can convince the folks I'm working with that, hey, all right, you guys have already said you're okay with this costing us money. So let's be real about the amount of money it's going to cost and the amount of investment that we're going to need to make, or policy decisions that we need to make to ensure that this thing is a success. Okay, let's be real about it. Yeah. And that's I'm not a complicated person, and so we go about these big decisions, and I go about them just trying to deal with reality, So
I am. Well, and I'm excited, which we talked about before. So I look at it twofold. It's like I leave it to you guys to make the decision if it's going to happen, and then once it happens, then I get excited about something else happening in the community to bring people in. So, speaking of things that are coming into the community, there was another big announcement that we're going to talk about. Unless there was something else you wanted to say about the aquarium. No.
I think we've covered it. I think the media has exhausted it, and now it's time to get things done, and time to, again, let's deal with the reality of this project that's been approved, and approach every step along the way with a practical perspective, and do what's right for the community, the success of the project, for the financial well-being of the county, et cetera, and try to keep a nice balance between all those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So therefore, let's move to Micron.
Yeah. Wow. It's funny, I'm still, and I'm really close to all the process. Okay. Mm-hmm. As far as everything that's gone on leading to the point where we finally got the announcement. And for me, it's hard to get my head around the scope of the impact that this project is going to have on our community. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be without pain. It's already had pain, right? We made a lot of decisions along the way, even throughout my tenure, especially throughout my tenure, to invest in that site and to prepare it for whatever the expectations were. And when I came onto the ledge, those expectations were pretty modest. But to the credit of people who think really big, mm-hmm. The sky's the limit. I'm going to switch gears for just a second because it's relevant. I always tip my hat to this guy whenever I have a chance. When New York City said no to Amazon, they said no to Amazon. They kicked them out. You remember that?
Yeah.
Down in Queens, I think they were going to build the facility we have here. They said no. And they said no because of a variety of different reasons. Again, I think it was a hyper-political situation that had legs in that community, ultimately won out, where politics prevailed instead of jobs, right? So New York City said no. And one legislator, Casey Jordan from Clay, he's no longer on the ledge. Good man, good guy. He stood up at the legislature and said, New York City said no, but we need to say yes. And he literally crafted a resolution for us to vote on that was almost like a letter to Santa Claus, asking for the most outlandish thing you could do. Now, this isn't the reason why I came, but the spirit, that mindset led to bigger thinking. Yeah, we could do a 1,000,000 square foot Amazon warehouse here and do what they're doing and support it with jobs and people to actually perform that work. And let's say yes. Let's say give us a thought, give us a look. And again, the moving parts were much more
but it has to start somewhere.
Substantial.
Right.
And I'm not even saying it started there because we were in the hunt
Okay.
for that as well. But I loved the mindset that Casey brought to the process. Philosophically, he said, yes, we can do it. Fast forward to this project. And, you know, I have to tip my hat to Ryan for thinking we can do this. We have the infrastructure. We have the natural resources. We have the geographic location, which is always nice with Syracuse. But at that particular site, which was originally set up for a few hundred acres of business park, that just never got anywhere. And we kept making little investments, and the state was putting money into the kitty to make to putting, I should say money, they were putting requirements into the equation to increase what we needed to do to make that site shovel ready. So all along, I was like, oh, another $5 million. Oh, another $10 million. Another million to do some other little thing to fit that shovel ready model for this few hundred acre park. These were agonizing votes. And then, you know, all of a sudden the federal government's a few years ago, we don't talk politics here, but a few years ago, there was a strong inclination to bring jobs back to the United States of America. That's really at the heart of this whole thing. It's, can we bring technology manufacturing back here? Can we become relevant? And can our workforce and invest in a way with government to make that happen? Great goal, right? And great to see that goal transition from one administration to another. And it's great to see that goal become feasible with Congress passing money to invest in an industry that we sorely need to happen here for our own self-reliance. And again, economically, it just makes sense for us. So I see that as, you know, companies putting their money in the right place. I see that as government investing the right way. And again, the vision to accomplish something as large as this is going to be the second largest kind of,
awesome.
Right? It's incredible. The number of jobs is incredible. The financial commitment is incredible. You know, it started with the economic development process, and that's our community leaders, you know, Ryan kind of at the tip of the spear, putting our hat in the ring for that opportunity. And then from there, more people became engaged. You know, the I always call them the Chamber of Commerce, but Center State CEO, other government entities, the state, okay? And when the federal government really, when it appeared the federal government was really serious about this with legislation to commit dollars to really take a hard shot at this, you know, let's keep these chip manufacturers building in the United States as opposed to overseas. That's going to take money. And as you know, that was as most people know, that was a very contentious process within Congress. But ultimately it passed. So hats off to everybody that made that happen and everybody that supported it. And as that happened, you know, that meant New York State had to up their ante. They already had an ante because everybody was on board. But New York State had to up its ante. And, you know, we've had all kinds of investment over the years. I mean, technically we've owned the property for 30 years, Hundock County. But it's just been improved over time, particularly in the last, let's say 8 to 10 years. Okay. And then in the last few, more money has been spent, you know, acquiring more real estate. Optics are everything, right? So it's important to see that there's enough land available to really be viable. As I said, infrastructure is really key. Water, main goes right by there.
I was going to say, I don't know if people know that, but it's that resource of water that we have, right?
That's one of the biggest drivers. It's a sort of a marriage of convenience. The water's already there.
Yep.
And this plant is going in right next to it. So is an incredible amount of electricity, right? So, and then you've got highways, you've got access. It's not going to be without impact, right? I mean, there's going to be impact.
Right.
31 is going to be moved a little. There's going to be another 81 exit. All things with consideration of how we live our lives during the 20 years that this thing is going to be built. Folks that live over there, some have been accommodated already. Some will be accommodated in the way of just work with consideration of all that's going to have to happen and change to make allowances for these things. So we have a ton to learn and a ton to know. Our last session after we approved the budget, we approved $25 million. This is just scope, okay? $25 million. $25 million. The $25 million that was earmarked for that sports park. That also sat for 10 months because there was no decision made on it. No one was ready to really commit because, again, the business plan was not quite there, okay? So we took that $25 million, plunked it into the Micron project just like that because, and I'm not going to get into detail, but there's physical infrastructure things that need to be done. Site mapping, and then a little bit of more property acquisition now that we know exactly what's going to happen there. And then the other half is really going towards, I'm just going to generalize, community partnerships. So investing in the colleges in the area, in universities in the area to help us develop, train, educate workforce to support what's going to be happening here. And
I believe I heard, correct me if I'm wrong, but OCC already has implemented a program or is talking about putting in a program.
Yeah, OCC, man, they are so good. It was just a visionary in terms of a visionary leader with her feet planted squarely on the ground every single day, which is what I liked about working with Casey. She would, Dr. Craybill, there was always a practical approach. And it was always, sensible and based on need, not based on pie in the sky, not based on altruistic theory, right? But what we need, okay? So yeah, OCC has always been ahead of the curve, excuse me. They've been great. And now with Dr. Warren Hilton, I think his name is, I haven't met him personally yet. He seems to be just picking up where Dr. Crable left off, and I'm sure he'll be bringing new stuff to the equation as well. But already they're on board, okay? And so, and we're stepping up. Again, part of that money is just to say, hey, we know we have to do this. You know you have to do this. What's it going to take? We got to do some R&D. We got to do some housing studies. We got to build homes. Yeah. Realtor, ka-ching, right? So it's all that.
It's a big talk in my industry.
Yeah, I bet. So, and we really, we went from being fine, okay, to having a housing shortage.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
So we will have a housing shortage. And so I think it'd be good to see shovels in the ground to spark that kind of investment, private investment, right, to make these things happen. But we're even in our budget that we passed, putting money against housing incentives because builders can't just speculate. We need to see shovels in the ground, things being built to give them the assurance that, hey, it makes sense to invest.
Right.
And these are high-paying jobs, so we need a whole range of houses, either renovated and brought up to the needs of future members of the community, or new builds. Right. So it's a little of both, and there'll be incentives for the community to do both. So that should be a pretty good thing.
Yeah, and not to get off topic too much, but just from a standpoint of my industry, there's already investors coming to Syracuse to see what we have as far as like land and development and stuff like that. So it is interesting to just, the announcement happened and boom, we started seeing just people poking around, seeing, curiosity, maybe putting a little bit of money where they think it might be. But
well, my neighbors and I on the west end of Lysander would like to see the sewer district stay stopped where it is and no, let's keep our rural character, but we have to accommodate.
And there's going to be changes.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned the length of time of 20 years.
That's the full. I don't think it'll ever stop.
No.
The investment. I mean, you look at, you look at and since the InBev, since AB became an internationally owned company. I don't have the visibility to that. I did, and there were relationships there. They've got a slightly different focus now on how they do business, and I don't get to see, but the investment was constant. The change was constant. The walls may look the same, but the investment in the facility never stops, and I'm sure that hasn't changed a bit. The technology, the sophistication to continue to make themselves viable, to continue to employ the folks they employ, many of which are right here in this town. It's going to be unbelievable. But the sheer dollars, the things that have done, I mean, with the state, billions, federal government, billions. Okay. And now, even though we've made a lot of investment, now it's the county's time to step up. And I'm bracing myself for conversations that are going to be very difficult to get my head around. How many tens and hundreds or tens of millions of dollars are we going to need for this, that, and the other thing? And we're going to borrow for some of it. We're going to use cash for some of it. The $25 million that we just appropriated, that's cash, fund balance. That's the extra money that we have. We push that as a cash spend. But the infrastructure improvements and things like that, we're going to have to, and they're already underway. You have Seneca Knolls treatment plant, which, folks in Clinton Heights, Abbott Landing, and over that way, good news. I think by the end of the year or so, the odor control problem will be largely solved.
Yeah, that is good news.
Yeah.
Again, that impacts a lot of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there are poor people in that neighborhood that haven't been able to sell because they need this project done.
Right.
Okay. And the fact of the matter is that plant's been there forever. It's been there before the neighborhood. And now it's at end of life and it's being fixed to the tune of about $37 million.
Wow.
And it's being done on a schedule that's probably 2 to 3 years accelerated, which took a lot of work, by the way, to get it accelerated. But there's nothing worse than people who have beautiful homes, and a home is a home, right?
Right.
A home is a home, and if they walk outside and they smell the treatment plant,
it's just
once in a while it happens, but to have it happen as much as they were experiencing, not fair, not right. And hats off to the folks in the county Water Environmental Protection Department, who've been very customer oriented and doing their level best to solve the problems as they come up. They've been trucking raw sludge for over a year, trucking. So instead of letting it sit in those tanks and stinking out the neighborhood, they're running it right into trucks and getting it out of there. So to the extent that they can legally do it, there's only so much you can take without affecting this. We don't need to make this a poop conversation, but there's only so much you can do, during
right.
there's only so much you can take out of the system. There's a minimum you have to maintain from a biological standpoint. I can barely say the word biological, let alone understand what they do over there. But
but I think it's nice to know that at least something was getting done, because it is,
yeah.
Luckily I've never been over there when the smell has come, but I've heard enough about it to know that it's a problem. And so I'd like, unless you have something else, but we've talked about money a couple times, and when you talk about money and having to come up with money to pay for projects, I'm kind of curious now in the budget and how that works.
It's funny. No secret that we ended up with a very strong surplus coming through COVID.
Yeah.
A couple reasons for that. One minor reason, major reason, was that the state, in its concerns over the pandemic, said we're not going to fund you here, here, and there. And just for even numbers, 20 million, for example, was cut. And then there's a bunch of other, we'll call them surgical cuts, that had a tremendous impact on Onondaga County government. And those surgical cuts happened. Some of them were temporary, some of them are permanent, but they happened. Okay. And then the big cut, the $20 million, they didn't have to do. So that's one reason why we ended up with a little extra money. But the main reason why we ended up with extra money is that the county led the way. Forget about, whether you believe in COVID or how it was handled or right. None of that stuff matters. The fact of the matter is our county government is tasked with the responsibility of dealing with COVID. Okay. And dealing with COVID meant not only doing what it did from a public health standpoint in the community, which it had to do, which is very expensive, to millions and millions of dollars, unbudgeted, just plucked from all different areas where we could get it to repurpose not only dollars, but people. But then there was fiscal decisions made by the administration and the legislature together, just to pull back, because we don't know. We don't know what the future holds. We don't know what the impact is going to be. We got through the process with literally 9 layoffs.
Which was
9
incredible.
layoffs. Yeah. Right. There's public narrative out there that says, oh no, there were 300. No, there were 9 layoffs. 300 people were furloughed, or thereabouts. 200 something people were furloughed. There were 9 layoffs. People came back to work. People are back at their jobs. The one thing that sometimes happens in government is people say, well, we used to have X number of people doing this, and now we only have this many people doing this. Well, if someone in a leadership role, like leadership of the ledge or leadership of county government, who technically the county executive manages the day-to-day of county government, if someone were to say, oh, we need to get back to this number because that's what we had before, I would do everything I could to vote that person out of office as quickly as I possibly could. The narrative coming from the administration and the narrative embraced by legislative leadership, most legislative leadership, is that, look, we learned through COVID what's important, what isn't, how our lives have changed. Our lives have changed within that pandemic considerably. Okay. They won't be the same again. Okay. Because they just won't be. I own my business, silly example, but it kind of translates. People don't use cash anymore. So where I work, we've got all these ATMs that we're losing money on because nobody's using them anymore. So use the ATMs, but I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. They're a service to our folks we serve. But in any event, but it's just change. All right. Cash in our lives is different than it was in the past. Reporting to work is different than it was in the past. The notion of the acceptance of a hybrid work day or a hybrid work week or month is really feasible. Flexible schedules, really feasible. I read something the other day that said there was like a trend in HR circles is driving toward unlimited time off.
Really?
That's what I said. Really. I mean, my gosh, somebody's got to do the work.
Yeah.
But the point is we're thinking differently.
Yeah.
Our thought has changed.
Absolutely.
So prioritization, in tough times like that, and there were some really tough times. And again, because I'm a legislator, my job is in the real world all day, every day. And as a legislator, I blend in my public responsibility to those days and nights. Okay. So I have the benefit of kind of being to a small degree, an outsider looking in. And I get to balance what's happening in the real world with what's happening in government and what's happening in my community and with my neighbors who need help, So it's neat and encouraging for me, again, living in the world that I live in most of the time, to hear the leadership of county government saying, no, we've learned, we can do better. There are things that we've always done that we don't need to do anymore. There are things that are just different. We don't necessarily need the people, and this is interesting too. We don't necessarily need the people here doing this anymore because we've got this technology and these resources, but we do need people here because these are the emerging needs of the community. So you see a shift. Example, foster care. Foster care, year over year over year, the last several years, it's just the situation is getting worse. And you can draw dotted lines to the opioid crisis. You can draw dotted lines to all kinds of things out there in the community. Trends, poverty trends, family unit trends. Foster care is costing us millions and millions more every single year because it is a very serious problem in our community. Mm-hmm. And child and family services, same thing. Overarching issue in this county budget, getting kind of circling it back. Oh, it's all, everything I'm saying is relevant to our cost of doing business and how we're doing business. Finding people. So every employer out there is having trouble finding people. That's for sure.
Right.
Okay. But, we have a gaping hole in the sheriff's road patrol or police division. We've got a gaping hole in child and family services. These are areas of need. If you recall, a couple of years ago, the governor forced all municipalities in New York State, Cuomo, this is a few years ago, forced all municipalities in New York State to develop not a police reform plan, but like a sort of a.
Yeah, Chief Leffencheck talked to us about
exactly.
Yeah.
And, we did ours, and then ours became kind of the model across the community for them to kind of, because, like the justice system is at the county, the jails are at the county, the courts are at the county level. So, and then of course they're at the local level too, but it just makes sense. They can, when we do ours, they can adopt ours or they can tailor ours to their individual needs. Bottom line to that whole process was the number one thing people said was that they want public safety. This is at the same time some people were saying defund the police. So the number one thing they wanted was public safety, safety of their families, themselves, and their property. Mm-hmm. And this isn't coming from the suburbs. This isn't coming from the we'll call them, for lack of a better term, privileged areas. It's coming from every corner, and most especially from some of the most impoverished areas of our city, which needs to get better, needs to get fixed. And as I said, more and more money every year is put into those programs to help. So yeah, so where was I going? Millions of dollars being pumped into these programs and those priorities. Stepping back to the aquarium, where the public hearing process was pretty intense. There were a lot of things brought up. And again, separating the wheat from the chaff, that's our job, right? And letting folks know that, hey, this is our responsibility. These are the things we can control. We have a famous saying at where I work that is, hey, let's control what we can control. The rest of the stuff, hey, we got to just deal with it. But control what we can control. And we can control certain things. And that's where the investments are being made. And we can't control if New York State wants to redo West Genesee Street in the Village, despite potholes and bumps and things like that. Yeah. You can't control it. No. You can influence it. You can beg them, but it's up to them to do it. It's not, and with government, there's very distinct lines of responsibility, but there were some great things that were brought up within the aquarium discussion. And both the legislature and Ryan, with this budget, made sure that those things were truly, truly addressed. And I think if someone were to say to me, what do you like most about this budget? Well, I like the fiscal outcome. We're lowering the property tax rate, 56 cents, something like that. Yeah. And the levy is going down $1 million. So that's the local spend, the amount of property taxes we can raise. And we hope, even with everything that's going on, we'll be able to do something similar next year based on everything that we've seen in forecasts so far. But the thing I like the most is that even accomplishing those fiscal goals, and usually when you do that, something has to give.
Right.
Well, what's neat here is that there's lots of investment, both in terms of programming, in other words, sustainable expenses, things that we're always going to have to pay for, investments to improve strategic programming, particularly to help the poverty area, the infrastructure area, and of course, economic development. That goes without saying. There's going to be a lot of money we need to spend to get that site up and running. But the social programs. So, there's money being invested in parts of the city that are going to make a big difference. There's money being invested, community center and Onondaga, which is really kind of borderline. It's actually in the city, but the town of Onondaga, like right adjacent to it, a really nice community center there. There's investments all over the place to make our community better and to address the strategic needs of our community as expressed at times in public venues and settings like the Aquarium, where again there was some very impassioned testimony in those hearings from the public, and also at other venues. They come in and they just want to talk about it, and that's what it's for, right? So message heard, and I think there's a pretty good response. One thing that's really neat about this budget, getting into the financial piece a little bit, is that for the 5th year in a row, we're not using any fund balance to fund county government. And by that, I mean the operations of county government. Real bad look if you're dipping into your rainy day fund or your savings account to fund routine expenses.
Right.
All right. And the reason it's a bad look, and the reason why it costs us money when we do, if we were to do that, is that the rating agencies, Onondaga County has historically always had one of, if not, top 2, 3 financial ratings in the state of New York.
Mm-hmm.
That rating from Moody's, S&P, Fitch, all the different financial rating companies, that affects their pricing of borrowing. And large municipal government like Onondaga County, $1.4 billion enterprise, we bond for what we're going to do with roads every year. We bond to build, even though there's an offsetting revenue stream, we bond to build the Aquarium. You need those bonds to provide assurance to the private sector that, hey, we're going to pay for what we're asking you to build. So the Aquarium's going to be cash, or the Aquarium's going to be cash. Amphitheater was a bond. Aquarium's going to be cash. So again, I think we made the most of our financial position, our cash position, because of the savings during the pandemic that we achieved. There's still, and it's a conservative budget, because I think most of us feel that the Fed has been largely unsuccessful putting a stop to inflation. And as a result, there are feelings that we could see not a major recession, but at least a minor recession in 2023. So we're budgeting for that as well. So again, it's conservative. We probably could have created more savings. We probably could have used a little bit more cash, but we truly don't know when the Fed is going to, they were a year late to the game. And as a result, these big hits that are costing all of us a lot more money, your credit cards, home equities, even our property taxes through this inflated environment. And this is Central New York, man. Our prices don't ever go down. There's no such thing as elasticity, right? Price elasticity here. Once real estate goes here, it's going to live there.
Right.
It's going to live there. So I like what this budget does. I like what it doesn't do as well, which is spend recklessly. I think, again, we're not using fund balance. That was an important goal because, the way the process works is the county executive hands us his version of a budget. And I say he does, but it's really the county government hands the budget over to the co-equal branch of government, the Onondaga County Legislature. Mm-hmm. That's day one. From that point, that budget from the legislature gets handed to the Ways and Means Committee, my committee, the committee that I chair. I don't own it. And And then we go through it. We have department heads come in, we have people come in, we have public hearing, and then we ultimately vote, the committee, on what to present to the general legislature after our review. That process, which takes a few weeks, is where our branch of government puts its fingerprints on the budget. In the past, there's been strong disagreement over some of those decisions, to the point of actually having some of those budget changes that we make vetoed. And other times it's gone very smoothly. Another neat thing about this budget is the collaboration between the administration and the Ways and Means Committee and the legislature in general, mostly legislative leadership, and how that all panned out. It makes for a smooth result. And perhaps best of all, in this climate and environment we're in, is that it was truly a bipartisan result, in that almost everybody voted for it, and those who didn't, I'm not sure they exactly knew. They didn't have good enough reasons to. That's all I'm going to say about that. But there's darn good budget, and again, good news for taxpayers at a time where, we all had property tax increases that cost us, like in Lysander, most of us are paying a few $100s more a year for our homes, at a minimum.
Right.
And at the same time, inflation is driving up, again, the credit card bills. If you have a variable rate credit card, home equities, which are based on prime, home equity lines of credit, that is, those kind of things, even student loans.
Oh, I didn't know about student loans.
Well, people have the option to borrow on a fixed or variable rate basis, and those with variable rates are probably feeling a little bit of a burn right now, and they're probably motivated to refinance, just like people might be motivated to refinance home equities. So because again, the rates have gone up, so they go from a home equity line of credit, which has a rate that moves, to a home equity loan, which it gives them, you know what you're getting. Right. And so it's crazy times. This is a budget that aligns with the needs of our community during these crazy times. It's my hope that, the village, when it does its budget in the spring, I think, and the towns, which are undertaking their budgets now, are taking all that into consideration. We sure did. And I'm sure they will, because I've had lots of dialogue with especially the Lysander town board members about the impact of assessments. I'm sure Bob has talked to you about some of that.
Absolutely. Yep.
And it's a crazy time. Mm-hmm. Who would ever thought that and this is the biggest indicator of, and part of me thinks it's wonderful that people on Social Security, especially those who rely on Social Security, are getting such a big boost this year. But that's it's also an indication of it's such an anomaly. It's an indication of how big the failure was by the federal government to stabilize the economy. Because those same people that are getting 9% increases, they're paying a whole lot more.
Right.
For everything else they do in life.
I was going to say, it's not like they're
pales in comparison.
Right. I would say they don't have more money to go do what they want with. They're trying to now cover the additional cost of everything.
It's just to me, it's a huge indicator of failure of the Fed to get this under control. They needed to start a year ago, and they didn't. And now we're looking at, on I think November 2nd, another 3/4 or 75 basis point increase to the Fed rate, which is going to hurt again. And it'll ding the stock market and 401ks and IRAs, and anyone that's got money invested that way is going to take another big hit. I believe that these hits are going to affect when people are able to retire downstream. I know that even folks that I work with are pivoting to figure out when, now with what's happened,
when they can,
when they're going to be able to, they're adjusting their plans.
Well, and I can say, because I really need to get with Mary Frances from the town of Van Buren, but I do talk to Bob with Lysander, and he had actually mentioned to me about the county budget, and that the tax rate had decreased just some, because that's what his hope is for the town of Lysander. I'm sure Van Buren. And I understand a lot more because he broke it down from the town standpoint for us. So and hopefully anybody watching both can break down the county one a little bit more, because it's obviously broader, but the idea of it is all still.
Yeah, principally, we're talking about the same thing. There's a total cost of government, and that total cost is supported by federal aid, state aid, fee revenue, fine revenue. Fee revenue being anything from sewer costs to water costs to all kinds of stuff. Autopsy costs. I could go on and on and on. There's so much revenue that comes in. Neat thing about Onondaga County government that few people know is that Shelly, it's been a little bit since I've done the math, but the total cost of government is supported. Well, property taxes support about 11-12% of the total cost of Onondaga County government.
That's a lot. And in my mind, at least, I figured that's a lot of money coming in, because I know what I contribute, what a lot of people, in our community contribute. And it's
11-12%.
Yeah.
Only 11-12%. And it's, and that's a good thing. I mean, that's something we say with pride, because,
otherwise you'd have to increase it.
Right. And that's why, sales tax and our pursuit of sales tax. And we have philosophical disagreements. There are people who want to just take the money, earmark it, throw it at a program. But then how do we pay for that increase of expectations next year?
So, and that brings us to a conversation you and I had maybe last year, where we thought, or the county thought, that sales tax was going to be really low.
Yeah.
And the amount of money that came in was surprising, but that was actually, again, helpful in hitting the numbers and stuff, right?
Absolutely, because while it's 12%, that sales tax gets us up to 50%, right? In terms of like the total cost between property and sales tax. Now we're looking at 50%. So sales tax is a wonderful thing. We're making investments in things like amphitheaters, in things like, again, I voted against the aquarium, but
you're going to go aquarium,
but an aquarium that gets people to come here, strangers to come here, walk through that mall, spend money in stores. And every time they spend money, there's sales tax at the end of it. Every time they stay in a hotel, there's room occupancy tax, which helps us market the area, and there's sales tax to help us defray the cost of government and needed services. All those programs we're talking about: poverty, infrastructure, economic development, public safety. That's what they fund. And we don't have to push that burden on property taxpayers. Now, we all know property taxes have gone way up. So the ability for us to dollar for dollar match the impact will be tough. But it's a good step in the right direction, given the uncertainty of what 23 holds. If we get through 23 without too much of a recession, or any recession,
that would be huge. It
would be huge for every single person living in this country, but especially those of us living in the state and in central New York. It's just, that's how it works. And you hope and pray that actually happens, because that can make a big difference for everybody. So but yeah, I'm glad Bob explained it. I think that too often people don't concern themselves until they get their assessment increase, and then they're like, holy smokes. And I got mine and I said, holy smokes. I couldn't believe my eyes. And then my phone just started blowing up. People calling from all points of the county. What am I supposed to do with this? Oh my God, it's going to cost me what? I said, trust your town board to do the right thing. But in case you don't, call them and say, hey, I want you to know, I don't want you looking at this as an economic windfall. And I'm confident, because I've had lots of talk with those guys, that's their goal as well, is to not treat this as an economic windfall. So we hope our towns, our villages, our schools will do just that, because unfortunately on the calendar, assessment increases don't necessarily align with the new tax bill. Okay. So, It is what it is. But these are just crazy times. I mean, who'd have thought? We'll never see a Social Security increase of 8.7% or 3%, whatever the final number was. Again, good for the folks on Social Security. Man,
But
they need
needed
it
it
under
right.
these circumstances. But typically that's, 0.6%, 1.4%,
Right.
it's very low numbers, just moving with moving the benefit with the value of the dollar.
Right.
But no one's got control of the value of the dollar right now. So good for them. And hopefully everything stabilizes in the near future.
Perfect. So, all right. Well, I'm going to end unless you have more on the positive Social Security, because I was worried about them. I'm not going to lie.
Me too.
Fixed budget and the increase. And, I talked to somebody over on off Hayes Road, and her mortgage went up $300. And it wasn't a house that you would ever consider the mortgage would go up $300 a month. And that was huge.
That's the problem, is that there's really no inherent value to the increase associated with the increased cost. Right. So that's where consumers are having trouble digesting the increases, but people and families also have to be able to afford them.
Okay. Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
well, thank you.
My pleasure.
Appreciate your time.
Good talking with you and everyone again.
Yeah. Let us know if you have any questions. I'll direct them to him, but he can message me.
Yeah.
Enjoy your day, everyone.
Bye, everyone.